Romans 8:28 says, "And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose." You may not see it now, but God is working in all things for your good. Even when life feels uncertain, even when it doesn't make sense, trust that he is orchestrating every moment, every detail, and every turn. There's no mistake too big for him to redeem. There's no failure too deep for him to restore. What the enemy meant for harm, God will use for his glory and your growth. In the midst of the struggle, remember, he is faithful. When the road gets tough, trust that he is with you, holding you, and guiding you. He is using everything, every joy, every challenge, every setback, to build you up and prepare you for the future he has for you. So don't be discouraged by delays, detours, or disappointments. God is working, even in the unseen. His plans for you are bigger than you could ever imagine, and his timing is always perfect. Embrace the journey, knowing that God's good is being worked out in your life, even when you can't yet see it. Hold on to his promises, for he will never leave you. If you believe, type Amen and share this with someone who needs to be reminded of God's faithfulness today.
What if your deepest pain, that struggle you're convinced is just meaningless, is actually the very thing God is using to shape your greatest purpose? It can feel like God has just vanished from your story. But one of the most famous verses in the Bible, Romans 8:28, holds the key to showing you that your suffering isn't for nothing. Let's talk about how. There's a special kind of agony that sets in when you're suffering and you just can't find a reason for it. It's the unanswered why. Why is this happening? Why me? And why now? You pray, you cry out to God, you look for some kind of sign, and all you get back is silence. That silence can be deafening. It can feel like you're in a spiritual free fall, just tumbling through the dark with no idea which way is up and no safety net below. You start to question everything you thought you knew. Is God really good? Does he even see me? Did he forget the promises he made? This feeling of being abandoned in your pain is one of the most isolating things a person can go through. You scroll online and see everyone else posting their highlight reels, celebrating their wins, and you feel stuck in a chapter of your story you never asked to be written. You start to believe the lie that your struggle is just a detour, a mistake, a sign that you've been kicked out of God's plan. We start wondering why we as Christians still suffer, even when God says he'll work things out for our good. During those seasons of hurt, when we lose things that are precious to us, it really feels like God isn't on our side. This is a dangerous place to be, because when pain feels pointless, hope starts to suffocate. You become convinced that all this hurt, all these tears, all these sleepless nights, they're for nothing. It's just a meaningless tragedy on a dead-end road. But what if that's not the truth? What if the silence you're feeling isn't God's absence, but his anticipation? What if the pain you feel isn't pointless, but purposeful? The Bible doesn't run from this feeling. In fact, it meets us right in the middle of it with a promise so bold it can feel almost impossible to believe when you're in that dark place. Right in the middle of Romans 8, which many people think is the greatest chapter in the Bible, the Apostle Paul writes something that has been a lifeline for believers for 2,000 years. He says, "And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose." Now we have to be really clear about what this verse does and does not say, because it's one of the most misused verses in the whole Bible. A lot of people hear Romans 8:28 and think it's a guarantee of a comfortable, pain-free life. They use it as a sort of spiritual band-aid to offer someone who is grieving, acting like their tragedy will magically turn into a good thing here on earth. But that can feel so dismissive and hurtful. Death isn't good. Abuse isn't good. Sickness and injustice are not good. This verse isn't telling us to call evil things good. It's not a promise that God will give us everything we want, or that every problem will just go away. The promise is so much deeper and more powerful than that. The verse says God works in all things, God himself is the one actively weaving every single circumstance, the good, the bad, and the horrifically ugly, together for an ultimate good. He isn't the author of evil, but he is the master of redeeming it. He takes the very things that were meant to destroy you and gives them a new purpose. He is so powerful that he can take the consequences of our own bad decisions and even the evil things other people do to us and braid them into the story of his grand design. So what is this good that God is working toward? The context of Romans 8 makes it perfectly clear. The very next verse says, "For those God foreknew, he also predestined to be conformed to the image of his Son." The ultimate good isn't our comfort, it's our character. It's not about our temporary happiness, but about becoming more holy. God is using everything that happens in your life with one main goal, to make you look more like Jesus. The suffering, the trials, the heartache, they are the tools God uses to refine us, to build our endurance, our character, and our hope. This is a promise for Christians, for those who love God and are called by him. It assures us that our pain is not meaningless, it is formative. In God's economy, not a single tear is wasted. If you want to see what Romans 8:28 looks like in real life, there's no better place to look than the story of Joseph in the book of Genesis. His life is a masterclass in how God can take the absolute worst, most unjust situations and weave them into a breathtaking story of redemption. Joseph's story starts when he's a teenager. He's the favorite son, and his older brothers are deeply jealous and hate him for it. This hatred boils over when Joseph shares these dreams he's had from God that his family would one day bow down to him. They plot against him, throw him in a pit, and then sell their own brother into slavery for 20 pieces of silver. Can you even imagine that betrayal? The terror, the feeling of being completely abandoned by your own family. Joseph gets taken to Egypt and sold to Potiphar, one of Pharaoh's officials. Even there, God is with him, and he succeeds. But the nightmare isn't over. Potiphar's wife tries to sleep with him, and when he runs away to honor God, she falsely accuses him of assault. He goes from being a trusted servant to being thrown in a dungeon for a crime he didn't commit. More injustice, more pointless feeling pain. In that prison, he could have become bitter. He could have cursed God and just decided that God had checked out of his life. But even in prison, Joseph holds on, and God gives him the ability to interpret dreams, which is what eventually gets him in front of Pharaoh. After Joseph interprets Pharaoh's dreams about a coming famine, he's lifted from prisoner to prime minister of Egypt, the second most powerful man in the world. He spends years preparing for the famine. When it hits, the whole world, including his own brothers, comes to Egypt for food, having no clue who he is. And this is the climax of the story. After testing his brothers, he finally reveals who he is, and they are terrified. They assume he's about to use his power to get revenge. But listen to what Joseph says. His words are basically the Old Testament version of Romans 8:28. He looks at the men who sold him into slavery and says, "Don't be afraid. As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive as they are today." Think about that perspective. He didn't downplay the evil. He looked it right in the face and called it what it was. You meant evil against me. He didn't say, it wasn't a big deal, or let's just forget it. He acknowledged the reality of their sin, but he didn't stop there. He followed it with a declaration of God's sovereign plan, but God meant it for good. He understood that his brother's evil choices were not the end of the story. God was writing a bigger one. The pit, the slavery, the false accusation, the prison, none of it was a detour. It was the path. It was the journey God had to take him on to position him, prepare him, and humble him, so he could save his family and countless others. He saw that what his brothers planned for evil, God had used for an incredible purpose. Joseph's story isn't just some ancient tale, it's a blueprint for us. It teaches us how to look at our own pain through the lens of God's goodness. You might be in the pit right now. You might be in the prison. You might only be able to see the evil that was done to you. That is real and it is painful. But like Joseph, we have to trust that God is with us in the middle of it, and that He has a bigger plan that we just can't see yet. Nothing that happens is outside of His control. So how do we actually live this out? First, we bring our pain to God instead of running from Him. The Bible never asks us to pretend we're not hurting. It shows us where to take that hurt, to the God who entered our suffering Himself through His Son, Jesus. Second, we have to adjust our definition of good. The good God is working toward isn't always a comfortable life, but a Christ-like life. And there will come a day when you'll be able to look back and see how God used all the painful chapters to shape you more into the image of Jesus. God is not unaware of your struggle. He sees you. He is with you, and He is working. He is taking the broken pieces of your story, the parts that make no sense, the parts you wish you could just erase, and He is weaving them together for a purpose that is far greater than your pain. Your suffering is not a period at the end of a sentence. It's a comma, a chapter in the much larger story of His redemption. If this has encouraged you today, I'd love for you to subscribe for more content that helps find hope in the hard places. Also, if you can think of one person who is walking through a tough season, maybe share this video with them. You never know how much they might need to hear that their struggle isn't for nothing. Finally, I just want to end with a prayer for you. Father, for the person watching this who feels like their pain is pointless, I pray you would remind them of your promise in Romans 8:28. Help them to trust that you are working all things together for their good and your glory. Give them the faith to believe that their present suffering is not the end of the story, and that you are weaving it all into a beautiful tapestry of redemption. Remind them that nothing, absolutely nothing, can separate them from your love. Amen.